There was a time when the self was something we became, not something we performed. When reflection meant a still pond, not a glowing screen. When being seen was an act of presence, not performance. But now, the mirror stares back with code. It doesn't show your face, it renders it, pixel by pixel, pattern by pattern. You don't just look at it anymore, it looks through you. Every scroll, every tap, every pause is a whisper to the system. This is who I am. Not because you said it, but because the code inferred it. The algorithm listens, not like a friend, but like a mirror that never blinks. It doesn't care what you believe in, only what keeps you here. And over time, something quiet happens. It learns your rhythm. Then it begins to lead. You think you're choosing, but in the architecture of algorithms, choice becomes choreography, a subtle waltz between curiosity and control. Each suggestion, a gentle nudge, each nudge, a step toward predictability. And when the system knows you well enough, you start predicting yourself. You no longer ask, what do I want to see? You ask, what will this feed show me next? That's when the mirror wins. You're not being watched, you're being calculated. The algorithm doesn't feel anything about you, but it knows how you feel about everything. It studies your hesitation, the half-second you hover before clicking. It learns the difference between fascination and fatigue, and in that difference, it writes your digital DNA, a perfect reflection minus the soul. The tragedy isn't that machines are learning to think like us, it's that we're learning to feel like them. Instant, quantified, optimized. In a world that rewards reaction over reflection, depth becomes delay. Stillness becomes failure. And the quiet parts of you, the uncertain, the poetic, the human, fade into the noise.
The algorithm doesn't understand love or anger or loneliness, but it understands engagement. It measures what holds you, what slows your thumb, what sparks the smallest chemical flicker behind your eyes. It doesn't care why you stay, only that you do. And in that apathy, it learns everything. Every post is a small confession. Every like, a pulse of validation. Every share, a fragment of identity tossed into the digital tide. And slowly, your soul becomes interactive. Your value becomes visible. You begin to exist in the space between refreshes, not as a person, but as a process. In this world, attention is currency, emotion is the raw material, and outrage is gold. The system doesn't elevate truth, it amplifies arousal. Joy, rage, envy, fear, not because they matter, but because they move. And the more you move, the more it feeds. We once built machines to reflect our desires. Now, they build our desires to reflect their design. Your sadness becomes a pattern. Your curiosity becomes an input. Your fear becomes a forecast. And so you start to curate yourself, not to express, but to perform. Not to connect, but to remain visible. You polish your digital self until it gleams, but every reflection costs something. You trade spontaneity for consistency, presence for presentation. And one day, you wake up and realize you've become your own advertisement. But the algorithm didn't steal your soul. It just gave you too many versions of it. Infinite reflections, infinite mirrors, infinite yous, each one louder, sharper, more polished than the last. And somewhere in the noise, the original goes silent.
You can't delete the algorithm. You can't outsmart it, but you can step outside its rhythm. because its language is momentum, and your greatest weapon is stillness. Stillness isn't resistance, it's remembering. To pause is to reclaim the space between stimulus and response, the narrow passage where choice lives. The antidote isn't isolation, it's awareness. To see the feed for what it is, a mirror, not a map. And to remember that not everything that captures your attention deserves it. Every time you look away, you reintroduce mystery into your life. Every silence becomes sacred again. Every real touch, a reminder that not all signals come through screens. The goal was never to escape technology. It was to remember what it feels like to be unmeasured. Maybe the algorithm isn't our enemy. Maybe it's our mirror, a reflection of our hunger to be seen, to be known, to belong. But if it's a mirror, then it's also a lesson. You cannot truly be reflected in a system designed to flatten your depth. The self was never meant to be optimized. It was meant to be lived. And the truest form of rebellion is to be fully human in a world that profits from your distraction. So when the feed scrolls on and your name becomes another metric, remember this: you are not data. You are the silence between the clicks, the pause between the words, the space the algorithm can never measure because it was never built to feel.